Okay. Howdy, everyone. Thank you for coming this evening. I am Cyan with Chevalier's Books. This is Los Angeles's oldest independent bookstore. And with all of the surge, we unfortunately had to move Dr. Tammy Nelson's event that we were going to have in store to Zoom. But we're really grateful for you to show up in the virtual sphere to hear Dr. Nelson read from the book, answer questions. So if you have questions during this talk, go ahead and put them in the Q&A or in the chat, and then I will either read them out loud or let you turn your video on so that you can say it yourself, depending on whether you want to stay anonymous or not. But yeah, without further ado, I guess we'll go into a reading portion and then kind of like a discussion and then the Q&A after that. Okay. And let's open monogamy.
Okay, thank you. Well, welcome everyone. I'm Dr. Tammy Nelson, and I'm the author of Open Monogamy, which is a guide to co-creating your ideal relationship agreement. And I am the author of 6 books. This is my 6th book. And I'm a licensed sex therapist, a sexologist, and a relationship therapist. And I'm the director of the Integrative Sex Therapy Institute, which is a training institute for therapists. And I'm in private practice in LA, and I'm right down the street from Chevalier Books. I was so bummed to not be able to come in and sign books in person for you, but I'm glad we could do this online. But I love Chevalier Bookstore, and if you're in the neighborhood or if you can get there, definitely come in and buy some books, because like I said, the oldest independent bookstore in the area, and they're just really nice in there. It's just so great to support them. And some of you have asked me to talk about, like, how did I get into this topic and why am I writing about it? Well, first, let me tell you what it is. Open monogamy means that you have a primary or central relationship or committed partnership or marriage, and you have a flexible or fluid relationship agreement. Like the way that you define your monogamy is pretty much any way you want to define it. And so in other words, it may not be your grandmother's definition of monogamy. And I think that's true for our contemporary world. Our cultural model of marriage and commitment is changing for all couples. And, in the 70s, we had the highest rate of divorce since we've been counting. And I think we've had a couple generations of people since then who grew up with divorce and grew up with parents that, had a lot of conflict and had a lot of cheating and infidelity, and have decided, I don't want to have a relationship where there's dishonesty or lying. I prefer to negotiate some other way of doing this. And I maybe can look at love in a different way. And I don't want to trade my partner in for someone else if they have interest or if I have interest in somebody outside of our relationship. I think it's like a new understanding that, we may be married, but we're not dead. But what do you do with those feelings? So I think the beginning of open monogamy means that we're open to conversations. We're open to being honest about how we feel and what we think, way before we even take anything into action or do anything different about in our relationships. And that honesty and integrity are the most important thing. It used to be that monogamy was synonymous with morality. And today that's not true. I think the most important thing about monogamy is honesty and transparency. And so for people in open monogamy relationships, the idea is that their love and commitment is their true north, and that being honest with each other and learning how to live with that in the best and most rewarding way possible is the most important thing. And that's what you keep coming back to over and over. So when I started my career, I was training to be a couples therapist. And in my graduate work and postgraduate work, nobody ever talked about sex. Like nobody ever did any education or training about sexuality. And I found that kind of interesting as a couples therapist. in all these couples therapy trainings that no one ever talked about sex. It's as if everyone's just roommates. And so eventually I got my PhD in sexology, and I was like sort of committed to helping people have more open and honest conversations about sex, and wrote a bunch of books, one of them being Getting the Sex You Want, which is integrating the conversations about sex into really good couples therapy models, but making it easy to have more passion and aliveness and talk about your fantasies and things that could keep your relationship going for, for longer periods of time, to stay in a relationship for, sometimes half a century, and to stay, or more, and to stay, interested and attracted and to want to be together. It's a skill. It's a challenge. And, just because you felt one way in the beginning of your relationship doesn't mean that's going to last your whole entire relationship. So I really believed in the idea that just because you're married doesn't mean that you have to follow some cliche about relationships that, monogamy kills your sex life and all that stuff. I don't think that's true. I do think that in our culture, we assume that if you get along in your companionship and you're good roommates, then your sex life will just work itself out. And that's not true. You have to work as much, if not harder, on your erotic life as you do in your companionship. And so a lot of the couples that came to me were really suffering from neglect more than anything else. And so I helped them with their erotic neglect, if you would. But then I found that they also were coming in for something traumatic that was happening in their erotic life. And those were things like affairs and other betrayals. And so I wrote The New Monogamy, which is redefining your relationship after infidelity. And that was really about how to sort of do a course correct, like affairs can be like a wake up or break up moment. And I gave people the tools in that book to redefine their monogamy, to create a whole new relationship based on some new communication skills, like new ways to look at their relationship, to say, wow, maybe this was the wake-up call we needed. Maybe we can do something different. Maybe we can create a new monogamy, not the monogamy that our parents had or that our church or synagogue said to do it this way. Like maybe we could do it the way it's going to work for us. And so as the therapist and the author, I don't really care how you do your monogamy, but I do care that you are able to have the tools and the techniques to talk about how to do it. And I'm really invested in you knowing how to have those conversations. And then I wrote a book called When You're the One Who Cheats, for the person who has the affair, because most of the books out there are for people who've been cheated on, but they don't really talk to the person who's had the affair. So I was really kind of interested in spinning the paradigm around. And then people started saying, well, wait a minute, can we rewrite our monogamy agreement without having to have an affair? Why does somebody have to cheat to be able to do this? Like, can we do it proactively? I mean, we all want to write our own monogamy. We all want to create our own agreement. We all want to live our best lives in our relationship. And can you just write something to tell all of us how to do it? And at least how to have the conversation, how to start the conversation, how to, navigate the danger points, and to be honest, how to close it down. If it's not working, you can shut it down. But what are the ways to do that? And so I interviewed about 40 couples and thruples and pods of people. And I also talked about the people that I saw in my private practice and sort of amalgamated them into other stories, and looked up all the recent research and did some original research about what really makes an openly monogamous relationship work. And people in that process were really generous about sharing what open monogamy was like for them. And what I found, and what I've found over the past 35 years of being a therapist, is that everybody does it so differently. People are so unique. Like the stories in the book range from, let's just have a conversation about pornography. Like, is that part of our monogamy? Should we tell each other every time we look at porn, or is that cheating? And we didn't talk about that when we got married. Like, I promise to love, honor you, and tell you every time I masturbate. Like, that's not in the rule book. All the way to like, what about if we have friends that we tell all our secrets to, and then we come home at the end of the day and we're exhausted and we don't have time for each other? Like, is that okay? And what if we want to have sex with other people, but we only do it when we're together? Or what if we're going to fall in love with other people? Can we integrate that into our relationship? And it's interesting because I wrote this book as we were going into the pandemic. And in the pandemic, I think one of the interesting things that we learned is that relationships are the most important part of our lives. Like, that is absolutely our number one priority. And I think we all learned this lesson about who we wanted to put first, and who we wanted to be in our pod, and who we wanted to make a priority. And I think the other thing that people learn is that sometimes you have to outsource some of your needs. Like, your partner may not be able to satisfy everything in your relationship, and they may not be able to fill all of your needs. And maybe, if you had someone who could homeschool your kids, and someone who could and was interested in doing stuff, outside, like going to movies or plays or theater, and somebody else who maybe was interested in working out, going for hikes, and somebody else that could have, like, you could have hot sex with because your other partners were tired. We almost have gotten to this point where we're remembering what it's like to live in a village, to have a tribe, to find our people, the people that we feel safe with, that take care of us, that understand us, that support us. And we've really gotten away from that in the last 75 years with this sort of nuclear family experiment, where two parents are supposed to take care of two kids, where one works and one stays home. Like that, I don't know if that experiment really worked, because it's not working now. So the other thing that's changed over time that I think has really influenced monogamy is that women no longer need to get married. Back then it might have been a necessity for many different reasons, but right now women are the gatekeepers of monogamy. And mostly because monogamy and marriage is no longer mandatory. Like it used to be, you needed to get married to have children, to legalize your name. You needed to get married to have life insurance, to have health insurance, to inherit property. Like women had to get married. It protected them. It kept them safe. It was a way of having resources. Well, today, you don't need to get married. You don't need to get married to have a child. You don't need to get married to have insurance or to buy a house, to get a mortgage, to have a kid, to adopt. Like, you don't need to get married. You choose to get married. You choose to make a commitment. You choose monogamy. It's all optional. And so this is the first time in history that women won't settle for things that are like less than optional, that are and less than optimal. So women tend to be the gatekeepers of open relationships. In heterosexual relationships, they're the first ones to decide whether or not it's going to happen. Anecdotally and clinically, what I see with couples, hetero couples, is that the male will say, I want to do it first. And the female partner will say, well, let me think about this. Let's talk about it for a while. Let me figure it out. But once they do it, they are the last ones that want to stop. The men want to stop first, and the women are like, no, this is working for me. And statistically, they just did a survey and found that 76% of women that are in open relationships are perfectly content. compared to like 26% of men, which I thought was interesting. And in general, however, the statistics say that the majority of people that are in open relationships are actually content and happy. So it's working if you work it. Now, I got another statistic and I want to make sure I got this right. Ashley Madison, which is an online website for people to cheat who are looking for other people that are married or committed that are also looking for someone to cheat. They have 70 million members worldwide. Okay, that's a big website. And they just did a survey where they asked their members if you would want to be in an open relationship, why or why not. And of the 3,000 people that replied, 74% said they would want to be in a relationship, but they didn't want to ask their partner, or they were afraid to ask their partner because they didn't know how to begin the conversation. And I think that's really true for a lot of people. You know, I think that I find that fascinating that people would rather have non-consensual non-monogamy instead of taking a risk to ask for consensual non-monogamy. Now, that doesn't mean that if they ask their partner would say, yeah, let's do it. They might say, no way, forget it. But it's interesting that so many people would rather be open and honest than cheat. And I think that's an important cultural imperative there, an important perspective. I think it's also interesting and important to note that, this is not new. Like, people have been in open relationships forever. People were swinging in the 50s and the 60s, which meant you basically, slept with other people's spouses with your partner's permission. Gay men and have been doing this for decades with the idea of, I don't know, Dan Savage calls it being monogamish, but the idea that you could have a romantic commitment and be romantically monogamous while being sexually more open and flexible and fluid, is the concept of monogamy something that has, always been optimal for men or for women, for families. I think it changes over time, but we've always had the option of outsourcing to other partners. It's just that historically, the negative consequences for women have always been greater. So women have, lost their children in divorce. They have been physically threatened. A lot of domestic violence has happened around infidelity in the past. So it's been much more dangerous for women to admit that they've been cheating, but they've actually cheated at the same rate as men have always, even if there's been a really high risk. There's been like 4 or 5 countries still around the world where women can be beheaded or lit on fire, immolated, or stoned to death for infidelity. And yet they cheat at the same rate that they've always cheated. And so there's something about seeking an outside relationship that is really inherent in who we are as people. Now, some of you might ask, is it that we're all like born to be monogamous or not? Some people say, I'm just not monogamous. And I don't know if that's true. There's really no biological proof about whether we're born to be monogamous or not. We're not born knowing how to eat with a fork either, but we learn, right? You have a prefrontal cortex. You're not going on our brainstem, which is our survival, fight or flight, reactive behavior. You can learn pretty much anything. And so monogamy is something you learn. It's a choice. And how you choose to do it and what you learn works for you is pretty much up to you. like you can learn the social norms of your culture and learn what you better not do if you don't want to be stoned to death. But you still have a choice. And so what you practice, you're going to get better at. And so monogamy is really a practice. And the way that you practice it, if you choose to have sex with other people and talk to your partner about it, or if you choose to be in romantic, emotional commitments without having sex, however you do it, and we'll talk about how you're going to do it and how to do it and what to say. It's like a yoga or meditation. It's a practice that the more you invest in it, the better you're going to get. So I know there's some questions, and I want to give you some very specific interventions, like how do you do it? What do you say? What's the first thing? What are the risks? What are the rules? How does this work? Cyan, I know you were fielding some of the comments, so I want to make sure I address them as well.
Mhm. I'm thinking maybe if we start with the questions and then go back into maybe some of these prompts at the end, so like how to start the conversation, like what phrases might be helpful. So we do have one question already, and then I have a question as well that we'll get to after this one.
Okay.
But we have one that says that you mentioned gay men and ethical non-monogamy.
Mhm.
Do you have any data? Has like your research shown anything about lesbian couples and ethical non-monogamy?
Yes, I have actually. So, well, first of all, there's research that shows they asked gay women, gay men, and heterosexual couples who has the best sex. And so what they found is that lesbian couples have the best sex, but they have it the least often. Gay men have the least rewarding sex, but they have the most sex. And when they tried to expand that study to talk about monogamy, and what they found is that gay men were more comfortable with non-monogamy. Lesbian couples were the least comfortable with non-monogamy. However, lesbian couples would be willing to have non-monogamy if the focus was on emotional and romantic connection. The one thing that seems to be the stickler for all women, heterosexual women and lesbian women, is the idea of jealousy. And jealousy is interesting. And this sounds so sexist, like all women are jealous. It's not necessarily true. Jealousy is down across the board, male, female, all genders, all orientations, all sexual interests, common to everyone. Jealousy is an emotion that everyone has, and it doesn't matter if you're in an open relationship, if you're an expert, if you're a relationship anarchist where everyone is equal and there's no primary or central relationship. People get jealous. Now, some people will say, I'm just not a jealous person. You may not be in touch with that emotion, and that might not be your primary feeling in your relationship structure. But jealousy is experienced by people differently. So there's really 4 areas of resources in a relationship: time, attention, affection, and sex. And so when you say, I feel jealous, what I'd want you to do is think more deeply and more concretely, like, what is it that you're afraid that you're losing in that relationship? Is it that my partner's spending too much time with this other person, or they're spending all their attention like texting with this other person, so I'm not getting enough attention? Or is it that, we don't sleep together anymore in the same bed, we don't snuggle on the couch, or is it really about the sex that suddenly, you're not getting the sex that you used to? Like, which part of it can you dig down a little bit deeper and sort of recognize what you're afraid of losing, and then also recognizing yourself, like, what's this bringing up for me that I might feel insecure about in myself? And so it's like a canary in a coal mine, and we all have those feelings.
We have another question from the audience, but I think it would be nice to kind of break it up and do my question next.
Sure.
So I was thinking about, you said that you did a lot of research for this book, and I was thinking about the original research that you did with these interviews, and I was kind of wondering, were the people that you did the interviews with, like, were they new to ethical non-monogamy? How long had they been ethically non-monogamous? Like, what is that like distribution like
Yeah.
doing it?
So some of the people in the book have been doing it for 25 years. There's a couple in there that have been doing it for 40 years, 45 years, I think. And then there's people that were just dipping their toe in, and there's some couples in there that have tried and didn't like it, didn't work, brought up too much conflict. And so there's really a wide range, gay, straight, trans couples, and all different ages too. It tends to be a developmental thing. Like when you first start dating, people are like, oh, you should shop around, don't commit. And then if you commit and you want a family, sometimes people like quote unquote settle down. And then as the kids get older, like when they're old enough to tie their shoes or put themselves on the bus, people start looking around and sticking their head up and going, I miss my sexuality. I want to like feel something again. And they tend to want to open up a little bit. And then a lot of middle-aged people have like a second adolescence where they're like, the kids are gone, like, let's party. Like, I want to live my life, because we live a lot longer than we used to and we stay in better shape. And then you get old and you're like in the final quarter and you're like, okay, I'm exhausted. Like, I just want to stay home. Like, let's just be home and watch Netflix. Those are kind of the developmental phases of monogamy.
I love that. I love how like wide of a range there is. This book has, and again, I'll drop the link to the book, but I love like the range that this book consists. Another question that we have from the audience is that someone has heard some women say that ethical non-monogamy and polyamory just isn't for them. They're wondering what you think, if that's like a result of societal norms or if it's genuine preference. What are your ideas on that?
So it's not for them as a result of societal gender preference. I think it could be both, and I also think it's developmental in your actual relationship. So, right now, if you're like, I just want to be really myopic, just be with my partner, we're doing fun stuff, we're having a great time, we're having great sex. Like, I just want to be open with my partner and open to possibilities and open to sexual exploration and open to whatever we can do to expand our relationship and also build up our foundation. That's great. And then, you may change your mind. You may want to get more open later on or not. And that might be societal. I mean, keep in mind, we're in LA, but there's a lot of different parts of the country that are super traditional, really patriarchal pockets of cities and towns and states where people are raised to believe that, anything outside of that traditional norm is really pathological. So it can take a lot to break through that and feel like they're not doing something that goes against, all of their values. So, and there's no judgment there. It's whatever people feel comfortable with. And I think that's what open monogamy means. Maybe it's just being open to whatever the possibilities are for you to expand the love that you already feel.
Sorry, I'm just reading. We have two more questions that have popped up.
Yeah, sure.
I think I'm going to save the one that came in first for the latter, because I feel like it segues really well into the prompts we were going to do. But I will say this one. What are your thoughts, or what research shows about the success of a non-monogamous person dating a monogamous person?
Well, that's very interesting. There's people that are like solo poly. So in other words, they want to be polyamorous, but they don't want to settle down to a committed relationship. They only date other people that are poly, but they, like there's a whole range of opportunity there. And you're right, there are relationships where one person's like, I want to be polyamorous, and the other person's like, I just want to be monogamous. That can be a form of monogamy agreement if both people are okay with it and if you can negotiate it. And I think anything that the two of you agree on is okay. And one of the ways to negotiate that is to not set rules. I have a real problem with the word rules, because rules are meant to be broken. And when you break a rule, like what am I supposed to do now? Like, I set the rules and now I got to follow you around and make sure you don't break them. And then I have to set some consequence. And then, then you parentify the relationship. And when you parentify the relationship, then it becomes really desexualized. And so I prefer to set boundaries for myself. Like, these are my boundaries, and my boundaries are flexible and fluid, and they can change over time. But there are red lines. So keep that in mind. Like, there are red lines. Like, if we're going to do this and we're going to be with other people, you have to use condoms, or it can't be with anyone in my workplace, or, there's red lines that people are going to really feel strongly about. If you can negotiate the what ifs, what if we did this? What are the positives and what are the problems? What if we did this? What would be the positives and what would be the problems? And frankly, you can talk about those things your whole life long without ever taking anything into action. And maybe that's enough. Just have the fantasy conversations, be curious. And it doesn't mean you ever have to leave the house.
I love that. And that segues really well into this next one, where we're thinking about like the what ifs, like what questions. And we were also talking about not framing it as rules. This question does say, what would you say, was there one rule or boundary or red line that most couples found necessary or helpful, or even just the most common between the interviewees?
Yeah, the most common quote unquote rule or red line is honesty. Even if the boundary is don't ask, don't tell, like, go do what you want. Like, when we're on vacation or when you go out away on business, do what you want. I don't want to know. But we're honest about that. That's the rule. That's the red line. Like, that's the boundary. That's the number one, non-negotiable here, is the honesty. Even if you're going to be honest about not wanting to talk about it. Some people want to know all the details of everything, and every person you have a fantasy about, and everything that you're attracted to, and everything that every person that you are attracted to in the grocery store, you should come home and tell me. Other people are like, oh my God, I don't want to know that. Please don't tell me.
So that's the last question we had from the audience, but I just wanted to say again, like, I feel like so much of this has become about the uniqueness of people, and how everything comes back to what you need and with your partner, and what, like, it really goes back to that a lot. And that's what this book is all about, right? Do you have any like final comment that you want people to leave with, if it's like a prompt or just like a mantra to come back to when thinking about open monogamy?
Well, I mean, I think you're right. I think in a time when we live longer, when we value more, gender equality, when we're looking at love differently and more openly, I don't think you can fit your love into a box anymore. It's not meant to be in a box. So, this is a time of like opening the box and, integrating the parts of you that may have been compartmentalized, split off, and hidden. That's what I mean by living in integrity. It's integrating all those parts of you that you may have had to split off and hide from your partner or from society. And now's the time to open those boxes and live in integrity with your partner, be able to say, this is who I am. And can we really be ourselves with each other? Like, this is a real revolution in how we love, that this is a way of expanding love. It's not taking away from what we have. And I don't expect that people can do this on their own right away. I think, sometimes you need a therapist to help you, or the exercises in this book, I think, can help people to start the conversation. And whatever level you're at, either beginner to advanced, I think there's stuff in the book for anybody to have those honest conversations about attraction, desire, shame, suspicion, wherever you're at, that it's time to explore sort of a new vision of love. Like, I think we're here. And, if anybody has any questions, they can email me directly at tammy@drtammynelson.com. I'm happy to send you like an excerpt of the book, but I prefer you got the whole book, and you can get it at Chevalier Books. But you can go to my website too, drtammynelson.com, or go to openmonogamy.com, and we'll put a link on there back to Chevalier.
Just waiting for a car to pass by. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I feel like this talk has been really nice. Just kind of like establish the abundancy of options that you have. And this book is a great guidance along the way. We have some comments, great talk. It is, I feel like this is one of the better Q&As that I've seen in a while because of just the openness behind it. But yeah, so I've been recording tonight for folks who came in a little later. If you know anybody who wanted to be here tonight but wasn't able to attend, it'll be up on Chevalier's YouTube channel in the next coming days. But yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Nelson. And I'll see you around the neighborhood to sign the other copies that we have and start.
Yeah, anybody wants to come in, I'm going to go in and sign those books. So go in and buy the books there so you get a signed copy. And I'd love to talk to you. Write to me and ask me questions.
Yes. Okay. Good night, everybody.
Thanks, Cyan. Thank you so much.